The end is always bittersweet, but also gives us a chance for new beginnings. And that's exactly what I have for you, a new beginning. Well, sort of. Hi, I'm Millie Copper, writer of cozy apocalyptic fiction and practical preparedness manuals. I am so glad that you're here with me today. Thank you for joining me on YouTube. I appreciate every time I see your comments and your thumbs up. It just really makes me happy. So now's a good time to tell you that it's okay to leave that thumbs up and to leave me a comment. And if you aren't already subscribing, please do subscribe so you get notified when a new video comes out. It really does help my channel. And this channel is all about bringing you audiobooks, the cozy apocalyptic fiction books that I write. I am now trying to share with you on YouTube. For the last several months, I've been sharing my Havoc in Wyoming series with you. I think we started either last June or July with the prequel, which is Wyoming Refuge, and then all 7 books: Caldwell's Homestead, Katie's Journey, Molly's Quest, Shields and Ramparts, Fowler's Snare, Pestilence in the Darkness, and My Refuge and Fortress, which just came out earlier this month. It dropped on February 6th, and that is book 7. The entire series is now complete as far as the serialized versions of it. If you've been following along, each of the books fed off of the book before, and each of them did have a little bit of a cliffhanger ending. I did try not to make it too big, but I know there were little cliffhangers at the end of each one. So, but now if you've listened to all of them, hopefully you're satisfied with the ending. And yes, there are still a few little questions, but have I mentioned that even though the Havoc in Wyoming series is concluded, I do have 2 spin-off series, Montana Mayhem and Dakota Destruction, and they do continue in the same world and continue to give us a little broader overview of exactly what is happening, where this disaster came from, and how everybody is surviving it. Since the Havoc in Wyoming series concluded back in, I think it was April of 2021, I've had lots of wonderful comments and messages and emails about the final book and how it ended. And most people liked it, but a few people did not. There were some very strong opinions. And surprisingly, what I really found interesting is people had incredibly strong opinions about Lucy. Lucy is the secondary character in My Refuge and Fortress, and we meet her at the beginning of the book, and she is an interesting character. So I would just really love to know, if you have listened to My Refuge and Fortress, what did you think of Lucy? So if you could drop me a comment. Erwin's here. Yes, you've met him before too. If you could drop me a comment and tell me, do you think Lucy, was she just doing the best she could to survive? Or is there something more with her? Is there a little something darker beneath the surface? So I would just love to know what you think without giving any spoilers away. So drop me a comment and tell me what you thought of Lucy. Now that we finished the 7-part series, I do have 3 more side stories for you. These are full-length books set in the Havoc in Wyoming world. And actually, I usually call them the half books because each of them was written to go between the main books. So let me tell you a little bit about those. The first one comes out in March, on March 13th. And this book is called Havoc Begins. It is the first side story of the half books, the first half book. So if you were going to read it in order, I do have a suggested reading order because I wrote the books in order of the suggested reading order. Does that make sense? I didn't write book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I wrote book 1, 2, 3, and then book 3.5, which is Havoc Begins, and then 4, 5, 5.5, and then 6.5 or something like that. And I probably should have put them out that way on this YouTube channel, but I really just wanted to get the entire 7-part series out for you. But now we will go back and do the half stories. So the first one, again, got my notes so I can tell you about my books, even though I know this book. I wrote them several years ago, and it's important for me to give you the accurate information. So Havoc Begins, we meet the characters Lori Esplin and Aaron Ogden and Bill Shane. They are prominent throughout the series, mentioned after we meet them in book 4, Shields and Ramparts. We meet them right as one of the new disasters is happening in Shields and Ramparts. So the idea of this story, I was taking Marshall martial arts classes. I don't even know how I thought of it, but I was in the martial arts class and I thought, I need to write a story about somebody who is very knowledgeable in martial arts. I know what I was doing. It was a board breaking class. And I thought, would I be able to break a board? I can break boards, but they're not very thick. But could I have enough power to knock over a human if I was kicking them or hitting them with my elbow or palm strike? So that was kind of how this story started, because the martial arts that I took wasn't just frou-frou martial arts. We did self-defense stuff. So with self-defense being a big part of the martial arts training I was taking, that really just got the story going. So yes, Lori Esplin and Aaron Ogden and Bill Shane are all into martial arts. Each one of them is a black belt, a Taekwondo black belt. I think Bill Shane actually has a couple of disciplines. So that was how Havoc began. That was how I started thinking about the story. And of course, I knew I wanted it to be part of the Havoc in Wyoming world, because at that time, I had no intentions of writing a bunch of other series. I do have a bunch of other series now, but then I thought it was just going to be the Havoc in Wyoming world, and that was it. Havoc in Wyoming was all I intended on. Anyway, Lori Esplin, who is the star of Havoc Begins, even though she has that martial arts, the discipline from training in martial arts, making it to a black belt, she had a lot of issues with the way the world changed. And this story is told in first person from her point of view. So it does get a little dark at times. And I write apocalyptic books, so it gets a little gritty. I don't really give trigger warnings, but I am going to tell you that it does get a little intense because we are in Lori's head. So that is Havoc Begins. That will come out on March 13th. And I do hope that you'll enjoy that story. Next, we have Havoc Rises. This is Shelby and Grant Cameron's story. We meet them at the end of Fowler's Snare, sort of. We hear about the group that's arriving from Prospect at the end of Fowler's Snare. But then we learn more about Shelby and Grant and all of the people that came from Prospect. We learn more in Pestilence in the Darkness and a little bit in Christmas on the Mountain. So they're mentioned in those books. If you were putting it in the reading order, it would be between Fowler's Snare and Pestilence in the Darkness. Up to this point in the story, we know a little bit about what's happening in Prospect. We know that the hospital burned down early on. I think that was in book 1 or 2, but we haven't really had people going to Prospect up to this point because, it's 30 miles away and they don't have fuel. So when the people from Prospect, Shelby and Grant, and the people that they're with come to Bakerville, that's when we first learn just what is happening in Prospect. So Havoc Rises is from Shelby's point of view. And at first they're pulling together, they're doing fine. And then, so this book is also where we first meet Lucy. She is a little bitty tiny bit part in Havoc Rises. So when you're listening in that, just see if you notice Lucy. She's not in there very much, but she is there. And we meet some of the other people that do have parts in book 7, My Refuge and Fortress. So Havoc Rises goes live on April 10th. And then the final half story is Havoc Peaks. Havoc Peaks is Clarice's story. We first meet Clarice in Molly's Quest. That's part 3. So Molly is in Oregon and Clarice is Molly's boss's wife. And Molly always stays at Clarice and Ben's house when she goes to Oregon to work. So as far as Molly is concerned, she and Clarice are friends. They get along very well when she's there. Molly always has a good time. She mentions in the book that Clarice spoils her. Well, Molly doesn't know is that Clarice really doesn't like her very much. So we do find out in Havoc Peaks the inner workings of Clarice and what she really thinks of Molly. We find out a lot about Clarice, especially because things go bad in Oregon and Molly had offered for them to come to Wyoming. There's less people in Wyoming, might be safer. I mean, we know because of the way it turned out, it wasn't really that safe, but it does sound when things are beginning that Wyoming Wyoming, with its lower population, would be safer than Oregon. As you would probably expect, getting from Oregon to Wyoming isn't that easy. So this is book 6.5 and would fall between Pestilence in the Darkness and My Refuge and Fortress. So again, Clarice's story, Havoc Peaks. This one, I like all of the books I write. I like the characters. There's something in the characters, whether they're good or not so good or a little morally gray. I always want to try to find something about them that is enjoyable. Clarice's story, this is probably my favorite book. Am I allowed to have favorites, or am I supposed to be like, oh, I love all my books equally? Clarice's story, I really do like it. I think the main reason is Clarice is not a very nice person. We see her in Molly's Quest, and she seems fine. She's helpful. But once we get into her point of view, so Havoc Peaks is written from Clarice's point of view, and we see what she really thinks about things and what she's really doing with her life, she isn't exactly as nice as she first appeared. So at the beginning of the book, she is not very likable. And we do learn a lot about her that Molly didn't know. But things do change along the way. And the person that Clarice becomes, because well, I don't want to spoil it for you, but God gets a hold of her heart. And I think that the changes are pretty amazing. And I have known people in real life who have had those exact same changes. It was obvious that God did a work in them and the fruit was evident. And I think that is what I love about Clarice's story. So Havoc Peaks is coming out on May 8th. And that is the last book in the official Havoc in Wyoming set of stories. So it is 10 books altogether with the 7 parts. And they have 2 novellas that are available. And then we'll have the 3 half stories. And then that will wrap up the Havoc in Wyoming series. So again, the first book drops on March 13th. So I hope that you will join me for that. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again.